A millionaire, fed up with a wife who has never understood his ambitions, pushes her into a swamp determined to get rid of her forever. "Take the divorce you want so badly," he shouts, convinced that she has no chance of surviving. He just hadn't imagined that she was pregnant, and years later what happens will surprise you. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The brush trembled in Sarah Mitchell's hand as she stood before her canvas in the art classroom, her students having left hours ago. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, illuminating the partially finished landscape she'd been working on between classes. The painting depicted a serene lake surrounded by towering trees, but something about it felt wrong, perhaps too peaceful, too perfect, much like the facade of her marriage to Richard. The sound of her phone vibrating against the wooden desk jolted her from her thoughts. Richard's name flashed across the screen, accompanied by a message that made her heart sink. "Working late again? Don't wait up." The same message she'd received countless times over the past few months, each one feeling like another crack in their increasingly fragile relationship. Sarah set down her brush and walked to the window, her reflection ghosting against the glass. At 32, she still possessed the same artistic spirit that had drawn Richard to her 6 years ago, but now she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Her once bright green eyes seemed dulled by worry, and her auburn hair, hastily pulled back into a messy bun, showed signs of premature gray she'd been trying to hide. The empty classroom felt like a sanctuary compared to the tension waiting for her at home. Here, surrounded by her students' artwork and the familiar smell of paint and clay, she could pretend everything was fine. But the reality was different. Their 6-year marriage was crumbling, and the weight of it all pressed against her chest, like a stone. A small frame on her desk caught her eye, a photo of their 7-year-old adopted son, Tommy, his gap-toothed smile radiating pure joy. They'd adopted him 3 years ago, after learning they couldn't have children of their own. While Sarah had fallen in love with Tommy instantly, Richard had always remained distant, viewing the adoption as a compromise rather than a blessing. Sarah gathered her things, her movements slow and deliberate, dreading the evening ahead. As she locked up the classroom, the school's empty hallways echoed with her footsteps, each one bringing her closer to home and the inevitable confrontation she knew was coming. She'd found evidence of Richard's infidelity, lipstick on his collar, mysterious receipts and late-night phone calls he took in hushed tones on the balcony. The drive home was a blur of autumn colors and setting sun. Their house, a modern, 2-story in an upscale neighborhood, looked picture-perfect from the outside, another illusion in their carefully constructed life. Richard's car was already in the driveway, surprising Sarah. He rarely made it home before 9 these days. Inside, she found Richard in his home office, his tall frame bent over his desk as he studied financial reports. He barely looked up when she entered, his dark eyes fixed on the screen of his laptop. The late sunlight streaming through the window highlighted the silver threading through his black hair, making him look distinguished and somehow more distant than ever. "We need to talk," Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. The walls of Richard's office seemed to close in around her as she waited for his response. The room was a testament to his success. Awards lined the shelves, certificates hung on the walls, and everything was meticulously organized. Everything except their marriage. Richard finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "About what?" he asked, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what was coming. He closed his laptop with a soft click that seemed to echo in the tense silence. "About us, about Tommy, about everything." Sarah's hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to continue. "This isn't working anymore, Richard. We both know it." A muscle twitched in Richard's jaw as he stood, his 6'2" frame towering over her. "Is this about the adoption again? I thought we'd moved past that." His voice carried an edge of irritation that Sarah had become all too familiar with. "No, it's about your complete disconnect from our family. When was the last time you attended one of Tommy's school events? When was the last time we had dinner together as a family?" Sarah's voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. And what about your late nights at the office? Do you think I'm blind to what's really going on? Richard's expression hardened his professional mask, slipping to reveal something colder underneath. My career provides everything for this family. The house, the cars, Tommy's private school, none of that comes cheap. Someone has to make sacrifices. Sacrifices? Sarah laughed bitterly. Is that what you call your relationship with Jessica from accounting? The words hung in the air between them like poison. Richard's face went completely still, and for a moment, Sarah saw something flash in his eyes that made her take an involuntary step backward. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. You have no idea what you're talking about. And if you're thinking about doing anything rash, remember this. I built everything we have. The prenup you signed makes that very clear. You walk away, you get nothing. The following morning, Sarah sat in her doctor's office, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she waited for the results. The sterile white walls and antiseptic smell did nothing to calm her nerves. She'd been feeling different lately, more tired, more emotional, but had attributed it to the stress of her failing marriage. Now, as Dr. Anderson entered with a familiar manila envelope, Sarah's heart began to race. Congratulations, Mrs. Mitchell, Dr. Anderson said with a warm smile. You're pregnant. The words hit Sarah like a physical force, leaving her breathless. Pregnant. After years of being told it was impossible, after the heartbreak that led them to adopt Tommy, after everything, she was pregnant. The irony of the timing wasn't lost on her. But how? Sarah managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. We were told. Dr. Anderson sat down, her expression understanding. Sometimes these things happen. Medicine isn't always exact, and the human body can surprise us. You're about 8 weeks along. Sarah left the clinic in a daze, her mind racing with implications. The timing couldn't be worse. Her marriage was in shambles, Richard was having an affair, and now this. She drove to her favorite spot in the city park, needing time to think before picking up Tommy from school. The park was quiet at this hour, with only a few joggers passing by. Sarah sat on a bench overlooking the duck pond, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. A new life was growing inside her, a miracle she'd once desperately wanted but now filled her with conflicting emotions. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Board meeting running late, don't cook dinner. Sarah stared at the message, wondering how he would react to the news. Would it change anything? Would he finally step up as a father? Or would this baby be just another inconvenience in his pursuit of corporate success? The sound of children playing nearby drew her attention. A father was pushing his daughter on the swings, both of them laughing. The scene brought tears to Sarah's eyes as she thought of Tommy and how Richard had never fully embraced fatherhood. He'd missed Tommy's last 3 school plays, claiming important business meetings. The last one, Tommy had looked for his father in the audience until the final curtain call. Back at home, Sarah found Tommy in his room, surrounded by his artwork. Like her, he found solace in creating, his drawings covering every available surface. He looked up as she entered, his brown eyes bright with excitement. Mom, look what I made today. He held up a drawing of their family, stick figures standing in front of a house. Sarah noticed how he'd drawn Richard smaller than the rest, almost at the edge of the paper. It's beautiful, sweetheart, Sarah said, sitting on the edge of his bed. How was school today? Good. Ms. Peterson said I'm getting better at math. He paused, fidgeting with his pencil. Is Dad coming home for dinner tonight? Sarah's heart clenched. He has to work late again, honey. But how about we make your favorite spaghetti and meatballs? Tommy's smile didn't quite reach his eyes, but he nodded. As they cooked together in the kitchen, Sarah watched her son, carefully measuring ingredients, his tongue sticking out in concentration. She wondered how this pregnancy would affect him. Would he feel replaced? Would Richard finally show interest in a biological child while continuing to ignore their adopted son? Later that night, after Tommy was asleep, Sarah sat at her vanity, staring at her reflection. The weight of her secrets, the pregnancy, her knowledge of Richard's affair, her growing certainty that she needed to leave, pressed down on her. She opened her laptop and began researching divorce lawyers, knowing she needed to be prepared for what was coming. A notification popped up on her screen. An email from Richard to someone named Jessica, accidentally sent to their shared home. Account. Sarah's finger hovered over the mouse, her conscience battling with her need to know the truth. Finally, she clicked. The email thread between Richard and Jessica unfolded before Sarah's eyes, each message more devastating than the last. Their correspondence wasn't just about an affair. It revealed a calculated plan to systematically dismantle her life. Richard had been documenting every perceived flaw in her parenting, building a case to prove her unfit as a mother. He'd even discussed ways to manipulate Tommy's school records to support his narrative. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through months of messages. The Richard she thought she knew, the distant but essentially decent man she'd married, was a carefully constructed facade. In his private communications, he was calculating, cruel, and completely focused on maintaining his image as a successful executive, whatever the cost. The next morning, Sarah went through the motions of her daily routine with mechanical precision. She packed Tommy's lunch, drove him to school, and arrived at her classroom early to prepare for the day's lessons. Her students filtered in, their chatter and laughter a stark contrast to the turmoil in her mind. Mrs. Mitchell? A small voice pulled her from her thoughts. Jenny, one of her most talented students, stood before her desk holding a painting. "I finished the project you assigned." Sarah forced a smile, examining the child's work. The painting showed a family of birds in their nest, the mother bird protectively spreading her wings over her chicks. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. "It's beautiful, Jenny. You've really captured the emotion." Sarah's voice caught slightly as she spoke. "The way the mother bird shields her babies, that's exactly what mothers do." As her students worked on their projects, Sarah's mind wandered to the decision she needed to make. The pregnancy test results sat heavy in her purse, a secret that could change everything. She considered confiding in her mother, Eleanor, the former assistant director of the school, but hesitated. Eleanor had always been skeptical of Richard, sensing something beneath his polished exterior that Sarah had been too in love to see. During her free period, Sarah received an unexpected video call from Richard. Her finger hovered over the accept button, her heart racing. When she finally answered, she saw him in his office, looking immaculate in his designer suit. "Sarah, darling." His voice oozed charm, so different from his cold demeanor the night before. "I've been thinking about our discussion. I may have been too harsh. Let me make it up to you." Sarah remained silent, studying his face on the screen. Behind him, she caught a glimpse of movement, a flash of red dress and blonde hair quickly moving out of frame. Her stomach churned. "I want to take you on a special trip this weekend," Richard continued, either not noticing or choosing to. Ignore her reaction. "Just the two of us, like old times. There's this beautiful spot in the forest, perfect for a romantic picnic. What do you say?" The suggestion caught Sarah off guard. Richard hadn't suggested anything romantic in months, maybe years. Something about his tone, too smooth, too calculated, sent a chill down her spine. "What about Tommy?" she asked, watching his reaction carefully. Richard's smile flickered for just a moment. "I've already arranged for Mrs. Peterson to watch." "Him? Come on, Sarah, don't you want to save our marriage?" The bell rang, saving Sarah from having to answer immediately. "I have to go, Richard. My students are coming back." "Think about it," he pressed. "It could be a new beginning for us." After ending the call, Sarah sat at her desk, her mind racing. The timing was too convenient, right after she'd confronted him about the affair, right after she'd noticed the email. And something about the way he'd mentioned the forest setting made her uneasy. During her lunch break, Sarah found herself in the school's art supply closet, seeking a moment of solitude. As she organized tubes of paint, her hands instinctively protected her abdomen. The baby, their baby, deserved better than this web of lies and manipulation. A knock on the closet door startled her. It was Eleanor, her mother, holding a stack of old administrative files. One look at Sarah's face told Eleanor everything she needed to know. "Oh, sweetheart," Eleanor said softly, closing the door behind her. "What's happened?" Sarah broke down, telling her mother everything. The affair, the emails, Richard's sudden change in behavior, and finally, the pregnancy. Eleanor listened without interruption, her face growing increasingly concerned. "You can't go on that picnic," Eleanor said firmly when Sarah finished. "Something's not right. Richard's never been spontaneously romantic, not in all the years you've been married, and choosing such an isolated location." "I know," Sarah whispered, "but if I refuse, he'll know I suspect something, and with everything I've discovered..." She trailed off, unable to voice her fears about what Richard might do if he realized she knew the extent of his betrayal. Eleanor took Sarah's hands in hers, her grip firm and reassuring. "Then we need to be smarter than him. If you go, you need protection. And more importantly, you need evidence of everything he's done." As they formulated a plan, Sarah felt a slight flutter in her stomach. Too early to be the baby, but perhaps her own instincts warning her that the upcoming weekend would change everything. She just didn't know how right that feeling would turn out to be. Saturday morning arrived with an unusual chill in the air. Sarah stood in front of her closet, carefully selecting clothes for the picnic. She chose practical items, sturdy boots, warm layers, and a waterproof jacket. The morning sickness that had been plaguing her for weeks was particularly intense today, as if her body was trying to warn her. Tommy sat on her bed, watching her pack with worried eyes. "Do you have to go, Mom?" he asked, clutching his favorite stuffed elephant. "We could stay home and paint together instead." Sarah sat beside him, pulling him close. "It's just for the afternoon, sweetheart. Mrs. Peterson will be here soon, and she's bringing those chocolate chip cookies you love." She forced cheerfulness into her voice, trying to ignore the growing unease in her stomach. Following her mother's advice, Sarah had taken precautions. Her phone was fully charged, with a backup battery in her pocket. She'd installed a location-sharing app and made sure Eleanor had access. Most importantly, she'd documented everything she'd discovered about Richard's deceptions, storing the evidence in a secure cloud account. The doorbell rang. Richard, arriving precisely on time as always. Sarah kissed Tommy goodbye, holding him a moment longer than usual. "Be good for Mrs. Peterson," she whispered. "I love you more than all the stars in the sky." Richard waited in his luxury SUV, looking casual yet perfectly groomed, inexpensive. Outdoor wear. His smile seemed genuine, but Sarah had learned to see through his masks. As she climbed into the passenger seat, she noticed a large picnic basket in the back, along with what looked like hiking gear. "I thought we could try something different," Richard explained as they drove toward the state forest. "Get away from the city, reconnect with nature and each other." He reached for her hand, but Sarah pretended to adjust her seatbelt, avoiding his touch. The drive was tense, filled with Richard's forced attempts at small talk. He asked about her art classes, something he hadn't done in years, and even mentioned Tommy's recent school achievements. Sarah responded carefully, playing along while noting how his knuckles whitened on the steering wheel whenever she gave short answers. They parked at a remote trailhead, far from the popular hiking areas. Richard shouldered the picnic basket and led the way down a narrow path. The forest was beautiful but eerily quiet, with thick undergrowth on either side of the trail. "It's not much further," Richard said, after they'd been walking for almost an hour. The path had become increasingly muddy, and Sarah could hear water somewhere nearby. "There's a special spot I found. Very private, very romantic." Sarah's heart began to race as they approached what appeared to be a clearing. Through the trees, she could see a marshy area with deep pools of dark water. Richard's pace quickened, his excitement barely contained. "Richard," Sarah said, stopping at the edge of the clearing, "I think we should talk before we go any further." He turned, his expression unreadable. "About what, darling?" "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Richard's face went through a series of emotions: shock, disbelief, and then something darker. He set down the picnic basket slowly. "That's impossible," he said flatly. "The doctors said..." They were wrong. Sarah took a step backward, every instinct screaming at her to run. "I'm 8 weeks along." Richard's laugh was cold, devoid of joy. "Perfect timing, isn't it? Just when our marriage is falling apart. You suddenly discover a miracle pregnancy. He took a step toward her. Or should I ask who the father is? You know it's yours, Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. Just like you know about the emails I found, the ones between you and Jessica. Richard went very still. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. You've been snooping? Through my private correspondence? His voice was dangerously quiet. That's not very trustworthy behavior, Sarah. Not very stable. The courts might be interested to hear about that, along with other concerns about your mental state. The courts will be more interested in your plan to falsify Tommy's school records, Sarah countered, and your documented attempts to build a false case against me. Richard's mask finally cracked. The sophisticated businessman disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. He moved toward her with deliberate steps, forcing her to back up toward the marshy area. You really should have kept quiet and enjoyed our picnic, he said, his voice almost conversational. It would have been so much easier that way. Quick, clean, tragic, a terrible accident during a romantic outing. But now, Sarah's foot slipped in the mud and she struggled to maintain her balance. The dark water of the marsh loomed behind her, deep and threatening. Richard's face twisted into a cruel smile as he reached for her. A sudden bark echoed through the clearing, startling both Sarah and Richard. A large German shepherd burst through the undergrowth, followed by a young girl of about 12, her arms full of wild herbs and berries. The girl stopped abruptly, taking in the scene before her with wise beyond her years eyes. Richard immediately stepped back, his demeanor shifting like a chameleon. The menacing figure transformed instantly into a concerned husband, his voice dripping with false worry. Darling, be careful, you're too close to the marsh. But the girl, Luna Martinez, wasn't fooled. She'd grown up in these woods with her father, and she recognized the predatory stance, the calculated positioning. Without hesitation, she whistled sharply, sending her dog, Max, bounding between Sarah and Richard. The marsh is dangerous here, Luna said calmly, her dark eyes fixed on Richard. My father says the bottom drops away suddenly. That's why we put up warning signs at the trailhead, the ones that seem to have been taken down recently. Sarah seized the moment to move away, from the marsh's edge, her heart pounding. The girl's presence was like a gift from heaven, but Richard's expression promised this wasn't over. We must have missed the signs, Richard said smoothly, though his eyes had turned cold. Perhaps we should head back, Sarah. We wouldn't want to risk any accidents. Luna stepped forward, positioning herself closer to Sarah. I'll show you a safer path. My father's cabin is nearby and you look like you could use some rest, ma'am. The trail can be exhausting in your condition. Sarah's hand instinctively went to her stomach, and she saw Richard's eyes narrow at the gesture. Luna's words confirmed what the girl had already guessed. She knew Sarah was pregnant. That's very kind, Sarah said quickly before Richard could object. I am feeling a bit lightheaded. Richard had no choice but to agree, his carefully laid plans disintegrating before his eyes. Luna led them along a different path, her dog Max keeping a watchful position between Richard and the two women. The girl moved with confident familiarity through the woods, occasionally pointing out poisonous plants to avoid, or particularly beautiful wildflowers. The cabin appeared suddenly through the trees, a solid, well-maintained structure that spoke of careful stewardship despite its remote location. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the small clearing around it was filled with herb gardens and medicinal plants. A tall man with graying temples stood on the porch, his posture alert as he watched their approach. Dr. Gabriel Martinez had once been a respected physician at the city's largest hospital, but now he was known locally as a skilled herbalist and healer. His eyes, as sharp as his daughter's, took in every detail of the situation. Welcome, he said, his voice carrying both warmth and authority. Luna, would you put some water on for tea? Inside the cabin, Sarah sank gratefully into a comfortable chair while Luna busied herself with the kettle. Richard remained standing, his discomfort with the situation evident in every rigid line of his body. We really should be going, he said, checking his watch with exaggerated concern. We have dinner reservations in the city. A cup of tea. First, Gabriel insisted, his tone brooking no argument. The trails can be treacherous when you're tired. Better to rest a moment. He turned to Sarah, his medical training evident in the way he assessed her condition. You're looking quite pale, Mrs. Mitchell, Sarah supplied. Sarah Mitchell. Recognition flickered in Gabriel's eyes, though he hid it well. Sarah Mitchell, the missing woman whose case had consumed his thoughts during his wrongful imprisonment 5 years ago. The woman whose disappearance had been orchestrated by the same corrupt business executive who had framed him, causing him to lose his medical license and his wife. Luna returned with a tray of steaming cups, the tea a special blend of her father's creation, calming herbs mixed with subtle medicinal properties. She handed the first cup to Sarah, her movements deliberate and careful. "It's good for the baby," she said softly, ignoring Richard's sharp intake of breath. "My father taught me about herbs that help with morning sickness." Gabriel watched Richard's reaction carefully, noting the way the man's hands clenched at the mention of the pregnancy. Every instinct honed by years of dealing with domestic abuse cases in the emergency room screamed danger. "Perhaps Mr. Mitchell would like to see my herb garden," Gabriel suggested smoothly. "I've developed quite a reputation for my medicinal blends. Many of your wife's symptoms could be eased with the right combination of natural remedies." Richard's refusal was immediate and sharp. "Another time, perhaps. Sarah, we need to leave." "Now?" But Sarah had caught Gabriel's subtle signal, the slight shake of his head, the meaningful glance at Luna. Whatever happened next, she knew she couldn't leave with Richard. Not if she wanted to protect herself and her unborn child. "Actually," she said, her voice stronger than she expected, "I think I need to rest a bit longer. The tea is helping, but I'm still feeling dizzy." Richard's facade cracked slightly, a glimpse of fury showing through before he could master it. Gabriel moved casually to stand near the door, his presence a subtle barrier between Richard and his intended exit with Sarah. "You'll feel better soon," Luna assured Sarah, her young voice carrying a wisdom that belied her years. "Sometimes, the forest shows us the path we need to take, even if it's not the one we planned." The tension in the cabin grew thicker as the afternoon light began to fade. Richard paced like a caged animal, checking his phone repeatedly, though the remote location offered little reception. Sarah sipped her tea, drawing strength from Luna's quiet presence beside her and Gabriel's steady vigilance. "The storm's coming," Luna announced suddenly, looking up from where she sat cross-legged on the floor, petting Max. The dog's ears had perked up, sensing the change in the weather before any human could detect it. As if on cue, thunder rumbled in the distance. Gabriel moved to the window, surveying the darkening sky. "It's not safe to travel the trails in these conditions. The paths become treacherous when wet." His voice carried the authority of someone who knew these woods intimately. "You'll both have to stay until it passes." Richard's reaction was immediate and volatile. "Absolutely not. Sarah, get your things. We're leaving now." "I strongly advise against that," Gabriel said firmly. "Flash floods are common in this area during storms. The marsh you were near earlier, it becomes particularly dangerous." The implied message wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Gabriel knew exactly what had almost happened at the marsh, and he was letting Richard know it. Sarah watched the interplay between the two men, seeing the calculations running behind Richard's eyes. He was trapped, unable to force her to leave without revealing his true intentions, yet equally unable to stay without risking exposure. "Then I'll go alone," Richard announced abruptly. "I have an early meeting tomorrow. Sarah, you can get a ride back with—" He gestured vaguely at Gabriel and Luna, not bothering to remember their names. "Of course," Gabriel agreed smoothly. "We'll ensure Mrs. Mitchell gets home safely once the weather clears." Richard moved to Sarah's side, bending to kiss her cheek. To anyone watching, it might have looked like a loving gesture, but Sarah felt the threat in his whispered words. "We'll discuss this at home." After Richard left, Sarah's composure finally cracked. Her hands shook as she set down her teacup, and Luna quickly moved to sit beside her on the couch, offering silent comfort. "He won't hurt you here," Gabriel assured her, his voice gentle but firm. "Luna, would you show Mrs. Mitchell to the guest room? She needs rest." The guest room was small but comfortable, with handmade quilts on the bed and dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Through the window, Sarah watched Richard's SUV disappear down the narrow road, its taillight swallowed by the gathering storm. "My father knows," Luna said quietly, arranging fresh towels on a chair. "About who you are, and about the man who framed him. Your husband's boss, they're connected." Sarah turned from the window, surprised. "What do you mean?" Luna perched on the edge of the bed, her young face serious. "5 years ago, my father was a doctor at City General. He discovered something about medical billing fraud involving your husband's company. Before he could report it, he was accused of stealing prescription drugs. The evidence was all fake, but it was perfect, too perfect." The pieces started falling into place in Sarah's mind. Richard's sudden promotion 5 years ago, the mysterious departure of several whistleblowing employees, the way he'd become increasingly protective of his corporate image. "The man who framed my father," Luna continued, "he wanted to thank the person who helped set it up. I overheard him on the phone once, talking to someone named Richard about a promotion they'd arranged." Sarah sank onto the bed, her hand protectively covering her stomach. "All this time, I've been married to someone who could do something so cruel." "But now you're here," Luna said firmly. "And my father always says that the universe has a way of bringing people together who need to help each other heal." A knock at the door interrupted them. Gabriel entered carrying a tray with more tea and some light food. "You need to keep up your strength," he said, his doctor's training evident in the way he assessed her condition. "Both of you do." Sarah looked up sharply, and Gabriel smiled kindly. "I may not practice medicine officially anymore, but I can still recognize the signs. How far along are you?" 8 weeks, Sarah whispered. "I just found out Richard, he doesn't want—" "What Richard wants doesn't matter anymore," Gabriel said firmly. "What matters is keeping you and your baby safe and helping you protect your son Tommy too." Sarah's eyes filled with tears at the mention of Tommy. "He's with our neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. Richard arranged it. Oh God, what if he—" "I've already called your mother," Luna announced, surprising both adults. "I found her number in the emergency contact list at your school's website. She's picking Tommy up now and taking him to her house. She says to tell you she has everything under control." Relief flooded through Sarah, followed quickly by exhaustion. The events of the day, the pregnancy, and the emotional strain all caught up with her at once. Gabriel noticed immediately. "Rest now," he said gently. "You're safe here. We'll figure out the next steps tomorrow." As Sarah drifted off to sleep, lulled by the sound of rain on the cabin's roof, she heard Luna and Gabriel talking softly in the next room. For the first time in months, despite everything, she felt truly protected. The next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of birdsong and the gentle clatter of cooking from the cabin's kitchen. For a moment, she felt disoriented. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up slowly, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. The guest room looked different in the morning light, warmer, more welcoming. Sunbeams filtered through the window, illuminating the dried herbs hanging from the rafters and casting intricate shadows on the handmade quilts. On a chair near the bed, she found clean clothes laid out, simple, comfortable items that Luna must have left for her. When Sarah emerged from the room, she found Gabriel at the kitchen table, surrounded by newspaper clippings and old files. His reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied the documents with intense concentration. "Good morning," he said, looking up. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Sarah replied, and realized it was true. The morning sickness that had plagued her for weeks seemed less intense today. "What are you reading?" Gabriel gestured to the chair across from him. "Evidence. I've kept everything from my case, everything that proved my innocence, though it came too late to save my medical career or my marriage." He pushed a file toward her. "I think you should see this." The file contained newspaper articles, court documents, and private investigators' reports. As Sarah read, a pattern emerged, one of corporate corruption, strategic sabotage, and carefully orchestrated character assassination. Her hands trembled as she recognized Richard's signature on several key documents. 5 years ago, Gabriel explained, I discovered irregularities in the hospital's billing system. procedures that were never performed, medications that were never administered, all tied to one insurance provider, Mitchell Healthcare Solutions. Sarah's stomach churned. Richard's father's company. Yes, when I prepared to report it, they struck first. Planted evidence, falsified records, even hired actors to pose as patients with complaints against me. Gabriel's voice remained steady, but Sarah could hear the old pain beneath his words. My wife couldn't handle the scandal. She left, taking Luna with her, but fate had other plans. Luna entered the kitchen carrying a basket of fresh eggs and herbs. Mom couldn't handle the truth, she said matter-of-factly, setting down her basket. But I knew Dad was innocent. I ran away from her and came back here. She didn't fight for custody. She was too busy with her new life in Europe. Gabriel reached out and squeezed his daughter's hand. Luna saved me, gave me a reason to keep fighting, to build a new life here. We've helped many people since then. Those who need to heal, to hide, to find their strength again. Sarah thought of her own situation, trapped in a marriage with a man who had helped destroy an innocent person's life, who had planned to do the same to her. But how did you survive it? The loss of everything you'd worked for? By remembering who I really was, Gabriel replied. They could take my license, my reputation, my marriage, but they couldn't take my knowledge or my desire to help others. Sometimes losing everything shows you what really matters. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Luna tensed, but Max just wagged his tail. A friendly visitor then. Gabriel opened the door to reveal Eleanor, Sarah's mother, with Tommy beside her. "Mom!" Sarah rushed to embrace them both, holding Tommy tightly. "How did you find us?" Eleanor smiled, her eyes sharp and knowing. "Luna's directions were very specific, and I had some help." She gestured outside, where a police detective stood waiting. Detective Martinez has been very interested in reopening some old cases. The detective, Gabriel's brother as it turned out, entered the cabin, his presence both professional and reassuring. "Mrs. Mitchell, we need to talk about your husband. He's made some interesting moves since yesterday." Sarah settled Tommy with Luna, who immediately engaged him in the task of collecting eggs from the chicken coop before joining the adults at the kitchen table. Detective Martinez spread out a new set of files. This morning, Richard Mitchell visited a private psychiatric facility, the detective began. He was attempting to arrange emergency admission for Tommy, claiming concerns about the boy's mental stability. Fortunately, your mother's custody papers blocked that move. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. He was trying to institutionalize our son? It fits his pattern, Gabriel added grimly. Discredit and isolate those who could expose him. With Tommy in an institution and you out of the picture, he would have controlled the narrative completely. But that's not all, Detective Martinez continued. We've been monitoring his communications. He's liquidating assets, making arrangements. Something big is coming and we need to be prepared. Eleanor reached for Sarah's hand. You need to tell them everything, sweetheart, about the pregnancy, about what really happened at the marsh. We can protect you, but only if we know what we're dealing with. Sarah looked around the table at these people who had become her unexpected allies, her mother, whose instincts about Richard had always been right, Gabriel, who had rebuilt his life from the ashes of destruction, and the detective whose dedication to justice might finally expose the truth. Taking a deep breath, she began to tell her story, starting with the discovery of her pregnancy and ending with Richard's attempt at the marsh. As she spoke, she could hear Tommy's laughter floating in from outside, mixed with Luna's patient instructions about collecting eggs. The sound strengthened her resolve. She had to fight, not just for herself and her unborn child, but for the sensitive, artistic boy who deserved so much more than what Richard had planned for him. While Sarah recounted the events at the marsh, Richard sat in his downtown office, surrounded by the trappings of success that had become his prison. His computer screen displayed a series of urgent emails from the board of directors questioning recent financial decisions. His carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel. Jessica hovered in the doorway, her usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. The board is asking questions about those offshore accounts, she said, stepping into the office and closing the door. And there's something else. Dr. Martinez's brother is a detective. He's been reopening old cases. Richard's facade cracked slightly, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Martinez should have stayed in his cabin playing with herbs. He's about to learn why crossing me is a bad idea. He turned to Jessica, his expression calculating. Get me everything you can on his daughter. The ex-wife in Europe, too. Richard, Jessica hesitated. Maybe we should cut our losses. The board's investigation, the detective, Sarah's disappearance. It's too much exposure. His laugh was cold, devoid of humor. Cut our losses. After everything we've built, no, we're going to handle this the same way we handle everything else, systematically and completely. In the cabin, Sarah finished sharing her story. Detective Martinez had recorded everything, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. We have enough for a warrant, he said, but Richard's too smart to leave obvious evidence. We need something concrete to connect him to both the attempt on your life and the fraud case that destroyed my brother's career. Maybe we already have it, Eleanor said thoughtfully. She turned to Sarah. Sweetheart, remember that cloud account you created? The one with all the evidence you gathered? Sarah's eyes widened. The emails between Richard and Jessica, they discuss everything. The plans to discredit me, the false psychiatric reports they were preparing for Tommy, even references to what they did to Dr. Martinez. Detective Martinez leaned forward. Can you access it from here? Gabriel produced a laptop, and Sarah logged into her secure account. The emails were there, along with financial records she'd photographed from Richard's home office and recordings of his late-night phone conversations. As they reviewed the evidence, a complete picture of Richard's corruption emerged. Look at this, Gabriel pointed to a particular email thread. They weren't just falsifying medical records at my hospital, they've been doing it across the entire healthcare network. Insurance fraud on a massive scale. Tommy and Luna came running in from outside, their faces flushed with excitement. Mom, Tommy called. Luna showed me how to make medicine from plants. Can we have a garden at home? Sarah hugged her son, breathing in his familiar scent mixed with fresh air and herbs. Maybe, sweetheart. We'll have to see what happens next. Luna, perceptive as always, sensed the tension in the room. Come on, Tommy, I'll show you how to feed the chickens. She led him back outside, giving the adults space to continue their discussion. We need to move quickly, Detective Martinez said. Richard's not going to sit idle once he realizes Sarah's not coming back. He'll try to destroy evidence, move, assets offshore. A notification pinged on Sarah's laptop. A new email had arrived in her cloud account. Richard had sent a message to Jessica, unaware that Sarah could still access his communications. Handle the Martinez situation permanently. Use whatever resources necessary. As for Sarah, prepare the press release we discussed. By the time they find her car in the ravine, the story will already be set. A tragic accident, a mentally unstable woman who couldn't handle the pressures of marriage and motherhood. Make sure Tommy's psychiatric evaluation is backdated appropriately. Everything needs to be perfect. Eleanor gasped, but Detective Martinez smiled grimly. That's what we needed. Proof of premeditation. Sarah, are you willing to play along for a little while longer? Make him think his plan is working. Sarah looked out the window at Tommy, who was laughing as Luna taught him to scatter feed for the chickens. Her hand rested protectively on her stomach, thinking of the new life growing there. Yes, she said firmly. It's time to end this. Then we need to move fast, Gabriel said. Richard's a predator and he's most dangerous when he feels cornered. As they began to formulate their plan, a thunderstorm rolled in over the mountains, casting dark shadows across the forest. In his downtown office, Richard stared out at the same storm, unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around him. The game of cat and mouse was entering its final phase, but he didn't realize that he was no longer the hunter. He had become the prey. The plan was set in motion the next morning. Sarah, following Detective Martinez's instructions, sent Richard a carefully worded text message. I need time to think, staying at Mum's with Tommy. It was exactly what Richard would expect, predictable, non-threatening, and completely false. Meanwhile, in his gleaming corner office, Richard orchestrated his own strategies. He summoned Jessica for their morning meeting, but something had changed in their dynamic. She entered his office with visible hesitation, her usual confident stride replaced by cautious steps. "The board is meeting this afternoon," Jessica reported, clutching her tablet like a shield. "They're asking specifically about the Martinez case and the insurance audits." Richard barely looked up from his computer. "Everything is under control. By the end of the week, we'll have more pressing matters to discuss." His smile was cold. "How are the arrangements coming along for Sarah's accident?" Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "The car has been prepared. The location you chose in the mountains, it's perfect. No one would question a tragic accident on those curves, especially with her supposed mental state." "And the psychiatric evaluation for Tommy?" "Backdated and ready to file. The institution is expecting him within the week." Jessica paused, then added hesitantly, "Richard, are you sure about this? He's just a child." Richard's expression hardened. "Having second thoughts, Jessica. Remember your position in all. Your signature is on just as many questionable documents as mine." The threat hung in the air between them. Jessica straightened her spine, but her hands trembled slightly as she made notes on her tablet. "So of course not. I'm just being thorough." Back at the cabin, Sarah worked with Detective Martinez and his team to document everything. They photographed bruises from Richard's rough handling at the marsh, recorded her statement about the attempted murder, and catalogued every threatening email and suspicious financial record she'd discovered. Tommy sat at the kitchen table, drawing elaborate pictures while Luna taught him about different healing herbs. His latest masterpiece showed their family, Sarah, himself, and now Luna and Gabriel too, surrounded by a garden full of medicinal plants. "Look, Mom," he called out, holding up the drawing. "Luna says we can plant these at our new house. They help people feel better." Sarah's heart swelled with love and determination. Her son, who had faced so much uncertainty and rejection from Richard, was already blooming in this environment of acceptance and care. She wouldn't let Richard destroy that. Eleanor arrived with more news. "Richard just called the school board," she reported. "He's trying to build a case that your emotional instability is affecting your teaching. But I've already spoken with the superintendent. They're standing behind you, Sarah." Gabriel, who had been studying the latest batch of evidence, looked up. "He's following the same pattern he used with me. Discredit, isolate, destroy, but this time we're ahead of him." Detective Martinez's phone buzzed, a message from his surveillance team. Richard just left his office, heading to the private psychiatric facility. He's making his move for Tommy sooner than we expected. Sarah's blood ran cold, but years of dealing with Richard's manipulation had made her stronger than she knew. "Then, we make our move first. Detective, is everything in place?" Martinez nodded. "The warrant's ready. We have teams standing by at his office and the company headquarters. We just need him to take one more step to prove his intentions beyond any doubt." As if on cue, Sarah's phone chimed with a message from Richard. "I've been thinking about..." "What happened? Let me make it up to you. Come home tonight, just you. We need to talk about Tommy's future." Gabriel read the message over her shoulder, his medical training allowing him to spot the subtle threats woven into the seemingly conciliatory words. "He's getting desperate. That makes him more dangerous, but also more likely to make mistakes," Detective Martinez added. "Sarah, are you ready for the next phase?" Sarah looked around the cabin that had become her sanctuary, at Tommy absorbed in his artwork, at Luna tending to her herbs, at Gabriel and Eleanor discussing strategy with the detective. These people had given her something Richard had spent years trying to take away: strength. "Yes," she said firmly. "It's time to end this game." She composed her reply to Richard, each word carefully chosen. "You're right. We need to talk. I'll come home tonight at 8. Just us." Richard's response was immediate. "Perfect. I'll have everything ready for us to discuss." Sarah knew exactly what he meant by everything, the same setup he had planned for the marsh, but this time in their own home. He would expect her to be emotional, distracted, vulnerable. He wouldn't expect her to be prepared. Luna approached, holding a small sachet of herbs. "For strength and protection," she said, pressing it into Sarah's hand. "Dad and I made it specially for you." Sarah clutched the sachet, drawing comfort from its subtle fragrance. In just a few hours, she would walk into what Richard thought was his carefully laid trap. But this time, she wouldn't be walking in alone. Detective Martinez began briefing his team, positioning officers around the neighborhood. Gabriel prepared a special tea for Sarah, something to keep her alert and focused during the confrontation ahead. Eleanor took Tommy upstairs for his nap, singing softly to him about guardian angels and protective spirits. Outside, storm clouds gathered again, as if nature itself was preparing for the showdown to come. But Sarah felt no fear this time, only a calm, steely resolve. Richard had underestimated her for the last time. At precisely 8 p.m., Sarah's car pulled into the driveway of her home. The house looked exactly as she'd left it 2 days ago, but everything had changed. Through the windows, she could see Richard moving about, setting his stage with meticulous care. Wine glasses on the coffee table, soft music playing, the perfect scene for reconciliation. Detective Martinez's voice crackled softly in the tiny earpiece she wore. "We're in position. Every exit is covered. Remember, we need him to reveal his intentions clearly. The recording device in your necklace will catch everything." Sarah touched the delicate pendant Gabriel had modified to contain a high-quality microphone. Her other hand brushed against Luna's herb sachet in her pocket, drawing strength from these tangible reminders that she wasn't alone. Richard opened the door before she could reach it, his smile practiced and warm. He'd dressed carefully for this performance, casual but expensive clothes designed to appear non-threatening. "Sarah, darling, I'm so glad you came." She stepped into the house, noting how he positioned himself between her and the door, subtly blocking her exit. The wine he'd selected was her favorite, another calculated detail. Everything about the scene was designed to lower her defenses. "We need to talk about Tommy," she said, refusing the wine he offered, "and about what happened at the marsh." Richard's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. "The marsh? We never made it to the picnic spot, remember? You weren't feeling well, so we came back early." His voice carried a warning. This was the official story, the one he'd carefully crafted. "Strange," Sarah replied, maintaining eye contact. "That's not how I remember it. Just like I remember the emails to Jessica about Tommy's false psychiatric evaluation and the offshore accounts and what you did to Dr. Martinez 5 years ago." The change in Richard was instant and chilling. His mask of concern vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. He set down his wine glass with deliberate care. "You've been busy, haven't you? Going through my private files, talking to disgraced doctors who live in the woods. I'm worried about you, Sarah. This paranoid behavior, these accusations, it's not healthy." "No," Sarah said firmly. "What's not healthy is planning to have your wife fall into a marsh, or trying to institutionalize your adopted son because he doesn't fit your perfect image, or destroying an innocent man's life to cover up your company's fraud." Richard moved closer, his height intimidating as he towered over her. "Think carefully about what you're saying. Remember what happens to people who make accusations they can't prove. Ask Dr. Martinez how that worked out for him." "You mean how you planted evidence to frame him? How you destroyed his career because he discovered your insurance fraud?" Sarah stood her ground. "I have proof of everything, Richard. Every email, every falsified document, every threat." "And where is this proof?" Richard's voice was dangerously soft. "Let me guess. In a secure location. With your lawyer? How convenient." He reached for her arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "You're confused, Sarah. Emotional. The stress of the adoption, the miscarriage attempts. It's all been too much for you." Sarah felt a surge of protective anger at his attempts to gaslight her. "I'm pregnant, Richard. The doctors weren't wrong about my infertility. They were wrong about it being permanent. But you knew that pregnancy would ruin your plans, didn't you? That's why the marsh had to happen now." Richard's grip tightened further. "A baby? How perfect. Another responsibility to tie me down, just when the company needs me most. But don't worry, darling. After your tragic accident, I'll make sure both our children are well taken care of. Tommy will get the psychiatric care he so desperately needs, and this—" his other hand moved toward her stomach. "This unfortunate situation will resolve itself." The threat to her unborn child was the final piece of evidence they needed. Detective Martinez's voice came through the earpiece. "We've got it. Move in." "Now?" The front and back doors burst open simultaneously. Richard spun around, stunned to find his house suddenly full of police officers. Detective Martinez entered from the front, his badge gleaming. "Richard Mitchell," the detective announced. "You're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, to commit fraud and witness tampering." He nodded to Sarah. "Well done, Mrs. Mitchell. Your recording device caught everything." Richard lunged towards Sarah, but Gabriel emerged from the shadows of the dining room, intercepting him with surprising strength. In seconds, Richard was face down on his expensive carpet, hands being cuffed behind his back. "You can't prove anything," Richard snarled as they lifted him to his feet. "It's my word against hers, and everyone knows how unstable she's been lately." Detective Martinez smiled grimly. "Actually, we have quite a bit more than that. Your associate Jessica has been very cooperative since we spoke to her this afternoon. Amazing how quickly loyalty crumbles when faced with concrete evidence of fraud." Sarah watched as they led Richard away, his perfect facade finally shattered. Through the window, she could see Eleanor's car pulling up, Tommy and Luna visible in the back seat. Her son was safe, her baby was safe, and Richard's elaborate trap had become the instrument of his own downfall. The weeks following Richard's arrest passed in a blur of legal proceedings and media coverage. Sarah sat in her classroom after hours, sorting through get-well cards from her students. The afternoon sun painted familiar patterns on the art room floor, but everything else had changed. The story had exploded across local news. Prominent executive arrested, corporate fraud exposed, wrongfully accused doctor vindicated. Gabriel's case had been reopened, leading to the discovery of widespread corruption in the healthcare system. The evidence Sarah had gathered, combined with Jessica's testimony, created an airtight case against Richard and his conspirators. A soft knock at the classroom door pulled Sarah from her thoughts. Luna stood there, holding a basket of fresh herbs and flowers. "Dad sent these for your morning sickness," she said, placing the basket on Sarah's desk. "He says the peppermint and ginger blend is working well for you?" Sarah smiled, touching the small bump that was now visible beneath her flowing artist's smock. At 12 weeks, the pregnancy was progressing beautifully, despite all the stress. "Your father's remedies have been a lifesaver. I haven't felt this good in months." Luna began arranging the flowers in a vase, her movements precise and thoughtful. "Tommy's really enjoying the gardening classes at the community center. Dad says he has a natural talent for healing plants." The mention of Tommy brought a warm glow to Sarah's heart. Her son had blossomed since Richard's departure, showing an interest in both art and natural medicine. The psychological evaluation Richard had arranged had been exposed as fraudulent, and Tommy's genuine psychological assessment showed a perfectly healthy, creative child dealing remarkably well with the changes in his life. "How are the preparations for the new clinic coming along?" Sarah asked, watching Luna work her magic with the flowers. "Almost ready," Luna beamed. "Dad's medical license was reinstated last week, and the board approved the integration of traditional and alternative medicine. We're calling it the Healing Garden Center." She paused, adding thoughtfully, "It's strange how things work out. If Richard hadn't tried to hurt you at the marsh that day, everything might have stayed buried," Sarah finished. "Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to exactly where we need to be." The door opened again, and Eleanor entered carrying a stack of papers. "The divorce papers are ready," she announced. "Richard's lawyers are trying to drag things out, but with the criminal charges and the evidence we have, they don't have much leverage." Sarah nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Not for the end of her marriage. That had been over long before Richard's true nature was exposed, but for the years she'd spent trying to make something work that had been built on lies. The board of directors called, Eleanor continued, sitting down at one of the student desks. They want to make things right. They're offering you a significant settlement plus a college fund for Tommy and the baby. And Gabriel, Sarah asked, are they compensating him for everything he lost? Eleanor smiled. Full reinstatement of his medical license, back pay for 5 years, and funding for his new integrated medicine center. They're desperate to avoid more bad publicity. Luna arranged the last flower in the vase with satisfaction. Dad says money can't fix the past, but it can help build a better future. Sarah touched her growing bump again, thinking of the future taking shape. The baby was due in early spring, a time of new beginnings. The ultrasound last week had revealed everything was developing perfectly, though she'd chosen not to learn the gender. After all the chaos and control in her life, she wanted this one beautiful surprise. Ms. Martinez, a small voice called from the doorway. Jenny, Sarah's young student, stood there clutching a painting. I finished another one. It's for your baby. Sarah welcomed her student in, examining the new artwork. Jenny had painted a garden full of healing plants with a small family tending them together. The details were remarkable. She'd included Tommy helping with the herbs, Luna teaching younger children about the plants, and Gabriel, in his doctor's coat, blending modern medicine with natural remedies. It's beautiful, Jenny, Sarah said softly. How you've captured everything perfectly. Mom, Tommy's voice echoed down the hallway as he ran into the classroom, his face flushed with excitement. Dr. Gabriel showed me how to make the sleeping tea. Can we try it tonight? Sarah hugged her, son breathing in the familiar scent of herbs that now clung to his clothes. Of course we can. But first, don't you have something to show Jenny? Tommy nodded eagerly, pulling out his own sketchpad. The two children huddled together over their artwork, sharing techniques and stories. Sarah watched them, feeling that baby moved slightly, just a flutter like butterfly wings. Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. You've created something beautiful here, sweetheart, not just for yourself and Tommy, but for everyone touched by this story. Looking around her classroom, at Luna arranging healing herbs, at the children sharing their art, at the evidence of growth and renewal everywhere, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. From the ashes of Richard's destruction, something new and wonderful had grown. The baby moved again, as if in agreement. The grand opening of the Healing Garden Center coincided with the first warm day of spring. Sarah stood in the courtyard, now transformed into a beautiful medicinal garden, watching as the community gathered to celebrate. Her baby bump was now prominently visible at 6 months, and Tommy hadn't left her side all morning, proudly showing visitors the herbs he'd helped plant. Gabriel, dressed in his restored doctor's coat with a stethoscope around his neck, moved through the crowd greeting patients and explaining the center's unique approach to healing. The building itself was a testament to new beginnings. The former urgent care clinic had been renovated to include both traditional medical facilities and spaces for natural healing practices. Mrs. Mitchell! A group of her art students rushed over, carrying handmade cards. We made these for the baby. They proudly presented their artwork, each piece incorporating healing plants and symbols of new life. These are wonderful, Sarah praised, admiring each creation. We'll have to display them in the center's waiting room. Luna appeared with a tray of herbal tea samples, her face glowing with pride. Dad's about to give the opening speech. Tommy, want to help me hand these out? Tommy jumped at the chance, carefully taking a few cups. Sarah watched as her son moved confidently through the crowd, explaining the benefits of each blend to curious visitors. He'd come so far from the quiet, uncertain child Richard had tried to institutionalize. Eleanor joined Sarah, slipping an arm around her daughter's waist. The divorce was finalized this morning, she said quietly. Richard's attorney delivered the papers. It's officially over. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling nothing but relief. Richard would be facing his own day in court soon, along with his corporate conspirators. Jessica had turned state's evidence, providing detailed testimony about years of fraud and corruption. Gabriel's about to start, Eleanor nudged gently. You should be up there too. This center exists because of your courage. Sarah made her way to the small platform where Gabriel stood, Tommy running to join her. The crowd quieted as Gabriel began to speak, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "Welcome to the Healing Garden Center," he began. "A place where modern medicine and natural healing work together, where broken spirits find strength, and where our community comes together to support each other's wellness journey." He gestured to Sarah and Tommy. None of this would be possible without the bravery of this remarkable family. Their story reminded us that healing comes in many forms, through medicine, through nature, through art, and through the connections we forge in times of adversity. Sarah stepped forward, one hand resting on Tommy's shoulder, the other cradling her growing bump. "When I first met Gabriel and Luna, I was running from danger. They didn't just offer me safety, they showed me a new way of living, where healing and helping others could transform even the darkest experiences into something beautiful." The crowd applauded as Gabriel cut the ribbon, officially opening the center. As people began touring the facilities, Sarah noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Detective Martinez, now promoted to Chief Investigator for the Healthcare Fraud Task Force. "Quite a change from that day in the woods," he said, approaching with a smile. "The task force has uncovered similar fraud schemes in 3 other states, all connected to Richard's network. Your evidence started a nationwide investigation." Sarah watched as Tommy demonstrated his knowledge of healing plants to a group of interested visitors, Luna by his side offering gentle corrections and encouragement. "Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the greatest positive changes," she reflected. Gabriel joined them, his face alight with professional satisfaction. "We've already got a waiting list of patients eager to try our integrated approach, and the medical board is using us as a model for other facilities. And the best part," Luna added, appearing with fresh tea, "is that we're helping people heal in all the ways they need, body, mind, and spirit." Sarah felt the baby kick energetically, as if adding its own approval. In just a few months, her child would be born into this new world they'd created, one where healing came in many forms, where art and medicine worked hand in hand, and where courage and truth had triumphed over deception. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the medicinal garden, making the herbs seem to glow. Sarah watched as visitors explored the paths between the raised beds, touching plants and asking questions. Children played in the specially designed healing garden there, laughter mixing with the soft sound of wind chimes. Tommy tugged at her hand. "Mom, can I show them my special garden, the one for the baby?" Sarah smiled, following her son to a small, protected corner of the courtyard where he'd created a special plot of gentle herbs and flowers. Each plant had been chosen with his new sibling in mind: chamomile for sleep, lavender for calm, marigolds for joy. As she stood in that peaceful garden, surrounded by the community that had helped her heal and grow, Sarah felt a profound sense of rightness. From the darkness of Richard's betrayal had bloomed something beautiful, a place of healing, a stronger family, and a future full of promise. The courthouse stood imposing against the spring sky as Sarah made her way up the steps, supported by Gabriel on one side and Eleanor on the other. At 8 months pregnant, every movement required extra care. Tommy walked ahead with Luna, both children carrying small bouquets of calming herbs from their garden. Today was Richard's sentencing hearing, the culmination of months of legal proceedings. The evidence against him had been overwhelming: attempted murder, corporate fraud, conspiracy, and witness tampering. The prosecution had built an airtight case, strengthened by Jessica's detailed testimony about years of systematic corruption. Inside the courtroom, Sarah sat between her mother and Gabriel, drawing strength from their presence. The gallery was packed with supporters, her students' parents, colleagues from school, patients from the Healing Garden Center, and even some of Richard's former employees who had come forward with their own stories of manipulation and abuse. Richard was led in wearing a prison jumpsuit, a stark contrast to his former designer suits. He'd lost weight during his pre-trial confinement, and his once perfect hair had started to gray. His eyes swept the courtroom, narrowing when they landed on Sarah's pregnant form. The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver hair, called the court to order. "Before we proceed with sentencing, would the victim like to make a statement?" Sarah stood carefully, one hand resting on her rounded belly. The baby, as if sensing the importance of the moment, gave a gentle kick of encouragement. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice clear and steady, "I stand here not just as a victim, but as a survivor. Richard Mitchell didn't just try to take my life. He tried to destroy everything and everyone I loved. He planned to institutionalize our adopted son, hiding him away because he didn't fit the perfect image Richard wanted to project. He attempted to end my pregnancy, seeing our unborn child as an inconvenience to his ambitions." She paused, looking directly at Richard for the first time. "But his actions meant to destroy instead created something beautiful. His attempt on my life led me to people who showed me true healing and strength. The corruption he tried to hide has been exposed, allowing Dr. Martinez to reclaim his reputation and create a medical center that helps hundreds of people. The truth he tried to bury has sprouted like a seed, growing into a garden of healing and hope." Tommy slipped his hand into hers and Sarah drew strength from his touch. "I don't ask for vengeance, Your Honor. I ask for justice, not just for me, but for every person whose life was damaged by Richard's actions. Let his sentence reflect the magnitude of his choices and ensure he can never harm another family again." The judge nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Richard. "Would the defendant like to make a statement before sentencing?" Richard stood, his movements stiff and controlled. "Your Honor, I maintain that this entire case is built on misunderstandings and exaggerations. My wife was emotionally unstable, influenced by a disgraced doctor living in the woods. I only ever acted in the best interests of my family and my company." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the courtroom. The judge's expression hardened. "Mr. Mitchell, the evidence against you is overwhelming. Your continued denial of responsibility only reinforces the court's concerns about your character." She lifted a document, reading from it with clear conviction. "Richard Mitchell, this court finds your actions particularly egregious. You used your position of power to destroy lives, attempted to murder your pregnant wife, and showed a complete disregard for human dignity. Therefore, I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 20 years. The gavel struck with finality, and Richard's face contorted with rage. As the bailiffs led him away, he shouted back at Sarah, "You'll regret this. Everything you have is because of me." Luna, who had been quietly arranging her herbs throughout the proceedings, stood up. "No, Mr. Mitchell. Everything she has now is because she was strong enough to stand up to you." Outside, the courthouse spring sunshine warmed Sarah's face as reporters gathered for statements. Detective Martinez handled the press, while Gabriel shepherded Sarah and the children to a waiting car. "How are you feeling?" Gabriel asked softly, his doctor's instincts evident in the way he monitored her condition. Sarah took a deep breath of the herb-scented air from Luna's bouquet. "Free," she replied, "for the first time in years, completely free." Tommy tugged at her sleeve. "Can we go to the healing garden now, Mom? I want to show the baby's garden to everyone." Eleanor smiled, starting the car. "I think that's exactly what we all need, a little time in the healing garden to celebrate this new beginning." As they drove away from the courthouse, Sarah watched Richard's world of concrete and glass recede in the rearview mirror. Ahead lay the healing garden center, where new life grew from rich soil, where broken spirits found strength, and where her family had found its true home. The baby moved again, more forcefully this time, and Sarah smiled. Soon, very soon, another new life would join their healing garden, growing up surrounded by love, acceptance, and the gentle wisdom of natural remedies. It was a future she could never have imagined in her darkest days with Richard, a future built not on deception and control, but on truth, healing, and the unwavering power of love. The Healing Garden Center buzzed with excited energy on a warm afternoon in late spring. Sarah's water had broken just as she finished teaching her last art class of the day, and now the entire community had rallied around her. Gabriel had transformed one of the center's peaceful birthing suites into a haven of comfort, with soft lighting and the gentle scent of lavender and chamomile filling the air. Luna moved efficiently around the room, arranging fresh herbs and preparing the special tea blends she and her father had crafted for this moment. Tommy sat nearby, carefully holding his mother's hand and telling stories about the special garden he'd planted for his new sibling. "The roses bloomed this morning, Mum," he said excitedly. "Luna says that's a good sign. New flowers for the new baby." Sarah smiled through another contraction, drawing strength from her son's enthusiasm and the peaceful environment around her. Eleanor sat on her other side, wiping her brow with a cool cloth infused with peppermint. "You're doing beautifully," Gabriel assured her, monitoring both modern medical equipment and traditional signs of progress. The birthing suite represented the perfect blend of his two worlds: advanced medical care, harmoniously integrated with natural healing practices. As labor progressed, Sarah found herself surrounded by the loving support system she'd built. Over the past months, her students had decorated the walls with artwork celebrating new life, healing, and growth. The parents of her art students had organized a meal train that would last for weeks. Even Detective Martinez's wife had dropped by with homemade bone broth and stories to distract her. "Look, Mum," Tommy pointed out the window to where a family of birds had nested in the healing garden. "They're having babies too." Luna smiled at his observation. "Nature has its own perfect timing," she said wisely, adjusting the herbs in the diffuser. "Everything blooms exactly when it should." The hours passed in a blur of controlled breathing, gentle encouragement, and the steady support of loved ones. As twilight approached, the garden outside took on a magical quality, with solar lights twinkling among the medicinal plants like earthbound stars. Finally, as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, a new cry pierced the peaceful atmosphere. Gabriel, with professional skill and grandfatherly tenderness, placed a healthy baby girl in Sarah's arms. "She's perfect," Sarah whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. Tommy leaned in close, gentle and curious, while Luna wiped happy tears from her own eyes. "She looks like an angel," Tommy declared, touching his sister's tiny hand with wonder. "Can we name her Angel?" Sarah smiled, remembering all the times she'd felt protected during her darkest moments. "What about Angela? Angela Luna Mitchell?" She looked at Luna, whose face lit up at the honor. "It's beautiful," Eleanor said softly, watching her granddaughter make her first quiet sounds. "A name that represents protection and light." Gabriel completed his medical checks with obvious satisfaction. "She's strong and healthy, a testament to her mother's strength and the healing power of love and community." As if to celebrate the new arrival, a gentle breeze carried the scent of night-blooming jasmine through the window. The healing garden seemed to pulse with quiet joy, welcoming its newest protector. Later that evening, as Sarah rested with Angela peacefully sleeping in her arms, she looked around at her assembled family. Tommy had fallen asleep in a comfortable chair, his sketchpad open to a new drawing of their expanded family. Luna was showing Eleanor how to prepare a special nursing tea, while Gabriel updated the baby's medical records with both traditional and holistic observations. The contrast between this moment and where she had been a year ago struck Sarah profoundly. What Richard had intended as her ending had instead become her true beginning. Here, surrounded by love and healing, she had found her real destiny. Angela stirred slightly, her tiny face turning toward the window where moonlight illuminated the healing garden. Sarah could almost imagine the plans Tommy was already making for his sister's own special section of the garden, the lessons Luna would teach her about healing plants, and the wisdom Gabriel would share about blending modern medicine with ancient remedies. "Welcome to our healing garden, little one," Sarah whispered to her daughter. "You're already so loved, so protected, and so free to grow into exactly who you're meant to be." The night deepened, stars twinkling above the peaceful scene. In the garden, night-blooming flowers opened their petals, adding their subtle fragrance to the symphony of healing scents. A new chapter had begun, not just for Sarah and her children, but for everyone whose lives would be touched by the love and healing that flowed from this special place. 1 year after Angela's birth, the Healing Garden Center had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a single building had expanded to include several acres of therapeutic gardens, a teaching center, and a research facility studying the integration of traditional and alternative medicine. On this particular autumn morning, Sarah stood at the podium in the center's new conference room, addressing a group of medical students. "Healing isn't just about medicine," she explained, gesturing to the artwork displayed around the room, pieces created by her students and patients alike. "It's about creating an environment where the whole person can recover, grow, and thrive." The students, notebooks open and faces eager, represented the first class of a groundbreaking program. Gabriel's case and subsequent vindication had led to a partnership with the state medical school, creating a curriculum that combined conventional medical training with study of natural healing practices. Through the conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows, Sarah could see Tommy and Luna in the children's garden, teaching a group of young patients about healing plants. At 11 years old, Tommy had become something of a prodigy in botanical art, creating detailed illustrations of medicinal plants that were now used in the center's educational materials. Angela, now a toddler with curious eyes, and her mother's artistic spirit, played in a secure area of the garden supervised by Eleanor. She had grown into a happy, healthy child, surrounded by the love and protection of their unique family. Mrs. Mitchell, one of the students, raised her hand. "How did you first discover the power of integrated healing?" Sarah smiled, remembering that desperate day in the woods. "Sometimes our greatest challenges lead us to our true purpose. I learned that healing comes in many forms, through medicine, through nature, through art, and through the connections we forge with others." After the lecture, Sarah made her way through the gardens to where Gabriel was conducting a clinic in the outdoor consultation area. He looked up as she approached, his face showing the satisfaction of a man who had found his true calling. "The new treatment protocols are showing remarkable results," he reported, sharing his tablet screen with her. "Combining conventional pain management with our herbal therapies has reduced recovery times by 30%. The board will be pleased," Sarah noted. The center's board of directors, established after the exposure of Richard's crimes, included medical professionals, alternative healing practitioners, and community leaders committed to accessible, integrated healthcare. Luna appeared with Angela in her arms, the toddler clutching a small bouquet of chamomile flowers. "Someone wanted to bring Daddy Gabriel his daily dose of calm," she announced, making everyone smile at Angela's thoughtful gesture. The sound of approaching footsteps drew their attention. Detective Martinez, now heading a specialized healthcare fraud unit, walked through the garden with Eleanor. Their regular visits had become both professional and personal, as the center's success story had helped expose similar fraud schemes across the country. "The appeals court upheld Richard's sentence," Martinez announced without preamble. "And there's more. They've approved additional charges based on new evidence. He won't be eligible for parole for at least 30 years. Sarah absorbed the news with quiet relief. Richard's attempts to manipulate the legal system from prison had failed, just as his attempts to destroy her life had ultimately led to something beautiful. Jessica completed her rehabilitation program, Eleanor added. She's been speaking at corporate ethics seminars, sharing her story as a warning about the consequences of enabling corruption. Tommy joined them, his hands stained with earth from the garden. "Mom, can I show them my new project? It's for the pediatric wing." He led the group to a specially designed garden area where young patients could participate in their own healing process. Tommy had created a series of raised beds at different heights, making them accessible to children in wheelchairs or with limited mobility. "Each patient gets their own small plot," he explained proudly. "They can grow herbs for their treatment, and watching things grow helps them feel better. Luna says it gives them hope." Sarah watched her son demonstrate the garden's features, his natural talent for teaching shining through. He had come so far from the quiet, uncertain child Richard had tried to suppress. Now he moved with confidence, his gift for combining art and healing touching countless lives. Gabriel placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You know, when I lost everything, my career, my marriage, my reputation, I thought my life was over. But looking at all this," he gestured to the thriving center around them, "I realize it was just preparing me for a greater purpose." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the healing gardens, highlighting the rich autumn colors of the medicinal plants. Angela toddled between the raised beds, stopping to smell flowers and touch soft leaves with wondering fingers. "The winter seedlings are ready for transplant," Luna announced, consulting her carefully maintained gardening journal. "We'll need volunteers for the community planting day." Sarah smiled, remembering how the community had rallied around them in times of crisis. Now they came together regularly, not in response to tragedy, but in celebration of healing and growth. In the distance, church bells chimed the hour, their sound carrying across the peaceful gardens. Sarah gathered Angela in her arms, breathing in her daughter's sweet scent mixed with garden herbs. Everything that Richard had tried to destroy, family, hope, healing, had instead flourished, growing stronger with each passing season. The 5th anniversary celebration of the healing. Garden Center dawned bright and clear. The gardens were in full bloom, a testament to years of careful tending and growth. Sarah stood in her old classroom at the school, now transformed into an art therapy studio, putting the finishing touches on a special exhibition. The walls were covered with artwork telling the story of healing and renewal, pieces created by her students, by patients at the center, and by Tommy, whose talent had blossomed beyond anyone's expectations. At 16, he was already receiving recognition for his botanical illustrations, which combined scientific accuracy with artistic beauty. "Mom!" Angela's voice rang through the studio as she ran in, her dark curls bouncing. At 5 years old, she was a perfect blend of creativity and curiosity. "Luna's teaching me about the new baby plants." Sarah caught her daughter in a warm embrace, marveling at how much her life had changed. The art therapy program she'd developed had become a model for other healing centers across the country. The integration of art and medicine, once considered experimental, was now recognized as an essential part of holistic healing. Gabriel appeared in the doorway, his doctor's coat now worn with pride rather than as a shield. "The first graduates of our integrated medicine program are starting their residencies," he announced. 25 new doctors, trained in both conventional and natural healing practices. The sound of children's laughter drew them to the window. In the school's courtyard, Luna was leading a group of young students in planting a new medicinal garden. At 17, she had grown into a poised young woman, already certain of her path as a healer. "Remember when this all started?" Eleanor joined them, wrapping an arm around Sarah's waist. "Look how far we've come." Indeed, the changes went far beyond their immediate family. The exposure of Richard's corruption had led to widespread reforms in the healthcare industry. The Mitchell Healthcare Solutions empire had been dismantled, its assets redistributed to fund community health initiatives. Tommy entered the studio carrying his latest work, a detailed series of paintings depicting the healing properties of local plants. His artistic style had evolved to include elements of both scientific illustration and emotional expression. "The medical journal wants to use these in their next publication," he said proudly. "They say it helps doctors understand both the science and the spirit of natural medicine." The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors to the exhibition. Former patients shared stories of healing, medical students eagerly discussed the integration of art and medicine, and community members celebrated the transformation of their healthcare system. Detective Martinez and his wife attended, bringing news that the Healthcare Fraud Task Force had prevented similar schemes from taking root in other cities. "Your story changed everything," he told Sarah. "It showed people that speaking up can lead to real change." As twilight approached, the celebration moved to the Healing Garden Center's main courtyard. Lights twinkled in the trees, and the air was rich with the scent of evening blooming flowers. Patients, doctors, students, and community members mingled, together, united by their shared commitment to holistic healing. Gabriel took the podium, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. 5 years ago, this center was born from a moment of crisis, but like the plants in our healing garden, something beautiful grew from difficult soil. Today, we don't just treat illness, we nurture wellness. We don't just practice medicine, we practice healing in all its forms. Sarah watched as Angela and Tommy demonstrated their garden knowledge to younger children, while Luna assisted Gabriel in explaining the center's innovative programs to visiting medical professionals. Every part of their lives had aligned in ways she could never have imagined during those dark days with Richard. The exhibition had included one special piece, a before and after representation of Sarah's own journey. The first image showed a garden choked by weeds and shadows, while the second depicted a flourishing landscape of healing plants and vibrant life. As the celebration continued into the evening, Sarah found a quiet moment in the meditation garden. The same stars that had witnessed her desperate flight through the forest now shone down on a scene of triumph and joy. She touched the herb sachet she still carried. Luna's original gift of protection had become a symbol of their enduring bond. "Mom?" Tommy's voice was soft as he joined her. "I've been thinking about expanding the children's art therapy program. Maybe we could create a special garden just for them to paint." Sarah hugged her son, feeling the strength and compassion that had always been his true nature. "That sounds perfect. Every child should have a safe place to grow and create." From the courtyard came the sound of Angela's laughter, mixing with Luna's gentle teaching voice. Gabriel's medical wisdom blended with Eleanor's supportive presence. The night air carried the fragrance of healing herbs and new possibilities. Sarah smiled, knowing that their story would continue to inspire others. From the darkness of betrayal had grown a garden of hope, a place where broken spirits found strength, where art and medicine worked in harmony, and where love and healing bloomed in endless cycles of renewal. 10 years had passed since that fateful day in the marsh. The Healing Garden Center had grown into a sprawling campus, its influence reaching far beyond the local community. On this particular morning, Sarah stood in the center's main auditorium, preparing to address an international conference on integrated healing practices. Tommy, now 21, and completing his dual degree in botanical medicine and fine arts, adjusted the display of his latest work, a comprehensive illustrated guide to healing plants that was already being adopted by medical schools worldwide. His childhood garden had grown into a renowned research facility where traditional wisdom met modern science. "Mom," he called out, making a final adjustment to one of his frames. "Did you see the latest journal publication? They're using our art therapy protocols in hospitals across Europe now." Sarah smiled, remembering the quiet boy who once hid his drawings from Richard's critical eyes. Now, Tommy's unique vision of combining art with healing had revolutionized patient care approaches globally. Angela, at 10 years old, sat in the front row, her tablet open to a presentation she'd helped prepare. Like her brother, she had inherited both artistic talent and a healer's heart. Her special gift was working with children, helping them express their healing journeys through art and gardening. Luna, now 22 and in her final year of medical school, entered the auditorium, carrying an armful of fresh herbs. She had grown into a remarkable young woman, combining her father's medical knowledge with her own deep understanding of natural healing. "The new pediatric garden is ready," she announced proudly. "We've incorporated Tommy's design for interactive art spaces between the plant beds. The children can paint and heal at the same time." Gabriel, his hair now completely silver but his eyes as sharp as ever, reviewed his presentation notes. The integration of conventional and natural medicine that had begun in their center had sparked a global movement. Medical schools worldwide now offered programs based on their model. Eleanor, elegant in her retirement but still actively involved in the center's administration, helped arrange the conference materials. "Richard's final appeal was denied last week," she mentioned quietly to Sarah. "He'll serve his full sentence." The news barely touched Sarah now. Richard's attempts to maintain control even from prison had faded into insignificance against the backdrop of all they had built. His former company's assets, seized in the fraud investigation, had funded healing centers across the country. As conference attendees began filing in, doctors, healers, researchers, and students from around the world, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. The garden they had planted in the ashes of destruction had grown into a forest of healing that sheltered countless others. Detective Martinez, now retired, but serving on the center's board of directors, arrived with a group of healthcare fraud prevention specialists. The protocols developed from their case had protected thousands of patients and practitioners from similar schemes. "Ready for the keynote?" he asked Sarah with a supportive smile. "They're all here to learn from your journey." Sarah touched the small herb sachet she still carried, a tradition Luna had maintained, refreshing the healing herbs each season. She looked out at the gathered crowd, seeing not just conference attendees, but the manifestation of a dream that had grown far beyond her initial vision. The presentation began with Tommy's artwork, detailed illustrations showing the growth of the center from a single garden to its current form. Each image told a story of healing, of transformation, of the power of combining different forms of medicine and art. Angela joined her mother at the podium, demonstrating how even the youngest members of their community contributed to the healing process. She shared stories of working with pediatric patients, showing how art and nature help children process and heal from trauma. Luna presented the latest research results, clinical studies proving the effectiveness of their integrated approach. The data showed significantly improved outcomes when conventional medicine was combined with natural healing practices and artistic expression. Gabriel spoke about the medical education program, now partnered with universities worldwide. The next generation of doctors would graduate with a profound understanding of both scientific and natural healing modalities. As Sarah took the podium for her keynote address, she saw faces in the audience that reflected her own journey. Survivors becoming healers, scientists embracing ancient wisdom, artists discovering their role in medicine. 10 years ago, she began, I stumbled into a forest running from darkness. What I found there wasn't just safety. It was a new understanding of what healing truly means. We don't just treat symptoms here, we nurture the whole person back to health. We don't just practice medicine, we practice compassion, creativity, and hope. The morning light streamed through the auditorium's windows, illuminating the healing garden beyond. In that garden, new patients worked with art therapists, children learned about medicinal plants, and medical students studied the integration of traditional and modern healing practices. Sarah's voice carried across the hushed audience, sharing not just their story, but the universal truth they had discovered. True healing isn't about fighting darkness, it's about growing toward the light. Every person who comes through our gates brings their own unique gift to our garden of healing. And like the plants we tend, each story of recovery and renewal seeds the ground for others to grow. The international conference concluded with a celebration in the center's main garden. As twilight painted the sky in soft purples and golds, hundreds of healers, doctors, artists, and patients gathered to share their stories and visions for the future. Tommy stood with a group of medical illustrators, explaining his techniques for capturing both the scientific detail and spiritual essence of healing plants. His latest project, a comprehensive guide combining botanical illustration, medical research, and patient testimonials, was already being translated into 12 languages. Angela moved through the crowd with Luna, both of them carrying baskets of herbs to share with visitors. At 10 years old, Angela had already developed her own special blends for helping children through art therapy sessions. Luna, completing her medical residency, had pioneered new protocols for integrating natural remedies with conventional treatments. Remember when this was? All just a dream, Gabriel asked Sarah as they watched the scene unfold. His eyes sparkled with the satisfaction of seeing their vision multiply beyond imagination. Sarah nodded, taking in the beautiful complexity of what they'd created. Our original healing garden had expanded into specialized areas. A children's garden, where young patients learned through play and art. A research garden where medical students studied plant properties. And a meditation garden where visitors found peace and renewal. Eleanor joined them, carrying a tablet with the latest statistics. The foundation has approved funding for 10 new integrated healing centers across the country, she reported. They'll all follow our model of combining medical care with art therapy and natural healing. The success of their approach had attracted attention from healthcare providers worldwide. What had begun as a refuge had grown into a movement, transforming how medicine was practiced and taught. Detective Martinez, now retired but still passionate about protecting patients' rights, chatted with a group of healthcare policymakers. The legal reforms sparked by Richard's case had led to stronger protections and more transparent medical practices across the industry. As evening settled over the gardens, Sarah gathered her family, Tommy, Angela, Luna, Gabriel, and Eleanor, for a quiet moment in the original herb garden where their journey had begun. The same plants that had once offered her protection now provided healing to thousands. "Mom," Tommy said, his voice thoughtful, "I've been thinking about the next phase. What if we created a teaching program specifically for children who've experienced trauma, combining art therapy with plant medicine like what helped me heal?" Sarah hugged her son, proud of how he'd transformed his own pain into a source of healing for others. "That sounds perfect. Every child deserves to find their own path to healing." Luna shared her own news. "The medical board has approved our new curriculum. Starting next year, every medical student in the state will receive training in integrated healing practices. They're calling it the Mitchell-Martinez Protocol." Angela, wise beyond her years, added, "Because everyone needs both medicine and love to heal properly." The night air carried the mingled fragrances of evening blooming flowers, medicinal herbs, and the subtle scent of art supplies from the therapy studios. Each element represented a different aspect of their holistic approach to healing. As the celebration continued around them, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What Richard had intended as an ending had become a beginning, not just for her family, but for countless others who found healing in their garden. "You know what this reminds me of?" Gabriel said softly, looking at the thriving community around them. "That first day in the cabin, when you were so afraid, but still found the strength to trust and heal. You've helped create a world where others can find that same strength." The stars emerged above the garden, the same stars that had witnessed Sarah's desperate flight through the forest a decade ago. Now they shone down on a place of hope and healing, where art and medicine worked in harmony, where broken spirits found renewal, and where love grew stronger with each passing season. "Our garden keeps growing," Sarah said, watching Angela demonstrate her latest herb blend to a group of visiting healers. "And every new person who finds healing here plants seeds of their own." As the evening drew to a close, visitors from around the world carried pieces of their story home, seeds of hope and healing that would grow in new soil, spreading their message of integrated healing and renewal across the globe. The legacy they had built would continue to flourish, offering hope and healing to generations